Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
to 20 months. Jeff?
John Roberts will be back to you shortly. Remember the wording there, no promises or commitments. That's not what the Times is reporting. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano is here. They're not saying, the Times is not reporting that Matt Whitaker provided promises or anything else. Here's what they're saying, that a phone call was made, and here's the full screen. In this phone call, the president asked whether Jeffrey Berman, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York and a Trump ally, could be put in charge of the widening investigation, the Cohen investigation, according to several American officials with direct knowledge of the call, asking him, hey, could we put my ally over here in charge of this Cohen thing? Because the Cohen thing had just gone very badly when Cohen testified under oath that the president directed him to make those calls, and in essence, according to the reading of that, making him something of an unindicted co-conspirator.
And Matt Whitaker testified under oath just a week or 10 days ago. The president referred to that testimony in answer to the question from one of the reporters, that he had not been asked to influence any decisions that the DOJ was being asked to make.
Well, is that the same thing, though? Because what he said was, could you put this other guy in charge? Could he be put in charge? The semantics often matter.
They do, because there's two potential crimes here for Matt Whitaker. One is actual perjury, lying to the Congress. The other is misleading. Remember, you could be truthful, but still misleading, and there are those two statutes there. You not only have to be truthful, you cannot mislead. So if he said, the president never asked me to do something, and it's misleading because he knew what the president wanted. Look, Jeff Berman is a respected lawyer because he's respected.
That's the one that, according to the Times reporting, the president wanted put in charge of the Cohen investigation.
Because the president nominated him and caused him to be the chief federal prosecutor in Manhattan. But Mr. Berman had the good ethical sense to say, this involves Donald Trump. I'm not involved in it.
This phone call, if the Times reporting is accurate, is that phone call evidence? The phone call would be evidence of what?
Corrupt intent. That is, an effort to use the levers of power of the government for a corrupt purpose, to deflect an investigation into himself or his allies. Remember, the federal prosecutors in New York have two investigations going on. One was the investigation of Michael Cohen, and that is passed on to a guy named Robert Kazumi. Mm-hmm. Bob Kazumi, a professional prosecutor, an apolitical person, used to be the chief prosecutor at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's the one who told a federal judge, this Michael Cohen, David Pecker, paying women to remain silent was orchestrated by Donald Trump. Second investigation, one still going on here in New York, is the investigation of the Trump inaugural and transition. Who paid for all that, and was there anything that went wrong in the payments? This must be some there because they are investigating it. President Trump, if the New York Times is correct, wanted his ally to be in charge of both of those investigations. And Matt Whitaker, to his credit apparently, did not execute that command.
But that phone call, you said that's evident of corrupt intent.
On the part of the president, because he's making a
Would that be obstruction?
Yes. It would be attempted obstruction. It would only be obstruction if it succeeded. But if you try to interfere with a criminal prosecution that may knock at your own door by putting your ally in there. That is clearly an attempt to obstruct justice.
The article is lengthy. It's online on the homepage of NewYorkTimes.com. Judge, there's more to it. There's discussion of others who are close to the president.
There's a very, very disturbing discussion in this article, which again the president denies, about his utilization of colleagues in Congress and utilizing...
Well, he wasn't actually asked about this part, but go on.
Utilizing, you're right, at least in the part we saw, utilizing their subpoena power, because the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives at the time, to subpoena documents that Bob Mueller wanted to keep secret in order to interfere with Mueller or embarrass Mueller or cause people to question Mueller's motivation. Quite frankly, I've never seen anything like this before. A sitting president of the United States using his allies in the Congress to interfere with an ongoing criminal investigation. This breaks new ground.
That's the allegation in the Times report today. The four reporters with the bylines there, people will know them, and their reporting has stood up quite well. You wonder, we're at the very beginning of this. This has only been out in the open for the last hour and a half. The president's White House had been involved, but if you watched him there, just as John Roberts just reported, it appeared from the president's reaction that he knew nothing of this. But certainly his White House did, because Maggie Haberman says the Times told him.
It appeared that he was surprised by the question. Now, maybe he was unaware.
Maybe he didn't know the article was out.
Right,
we don't know.
The article was out, but the article is, quite frankly, dynamite, lengthy, and well documented. Where it goes from here, I don't know, but I'll tell you who I know is reading it as we speak. Bob Mueller and team.
It is Wednesday, the 20th of February of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Indeed. Well, man. I mentioned earlier, and David had mentioned this as well, the Saudis could not bring America to its knees at 9/11, so Trump thinks that maybe a few nukes will help. Boy, normally that would be the news of the day. It would stop all the presses, but it's just another Wednesday in the Trump administration. Yeah, that's how far down the rabbit hole we've gone, folks. We have become so desensitized. I'm not even certain that a nuke blowing up in somewhere in the continental United States that was actually attributable to the Saudis would warrant much of a wrinkle. Pretty soon it'll be just calm and no one will even report on it because it's not news anymore. Oh, another nuke blew up. Gee, remember when we had all those schools shot up? Yeah, we stopped reporting them because they happened all the time. I mean, it's not news. Well, that entitled little rich kid, Sandman, Covington Catholic School. Well, he's going to sue the Washington Post for $250 million for defaming him. I mean, defaming him. They were just reporting. There was no defamation there. Oh, he says that he's been defamed because they called him a racist, and anybody who calls him a racist is going to be sued. Oh, really? I've heard some comparisons. The Parkland kids haven't sued anybody, and they've gone through tremendous hell. Not only by the fact that they were shot up by a madman or a mad kid, and their fellow students were slaughtered. They survived that, the horror of that. And then they went out in the world, but now the NRA has made it that anybody who's been shot is automatically the enemy because they're going to come out and say, it's not good getting shot. And that is really bad for the brand. When someone goes out in the world who has been shot and says, it's not good getting shot. It's like Oprah saying that, these steaks might have mad cow disease. It's not good to tell people that your steaks have mad cow disease because people might not buy them. I mean, they might die eating them, but at least they're buying them. And that's much more important now, isn't it? So this kid has a good PR firm. Well, yeah, his parents are running the show because they're bigot racists. Sue me. defaming you? No. Defaming you would be calling this kid, a quiet, contemplative aesthete on a spiritual journey of grace and benevolence. That would be defaming this bigot, racist thug. I mean, the guy is wearing a MAGA hat. Just put on a white hood, mofo. Oh, yeah, that Nazi over there dressed up as a Nazi is not really a Nazi. Yeah, come on. All right. Oh, and one other thing. You want to sue the Washington Post? Okay. Go right ahead. You're going to get a crash course, and your parents too, because apparently they're unaware. There's this little legal thing called discovery. What will they be finding in your parents' closets? We're not even talking about you. Wait until we get to you, kid. All right. What's on the rest of the menu here today? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, that was Judge Napolitano. What? And he was on Fox. He's on Fox. And he thinks Trump's not going to fare very well. Nope, they don't. It looks like Trump trying to get his pick to lead the Southern District of New York, overseeing the Cohen investigation, and then trying to get congressional allies to interfere with an ongoing criminal investigation. Well, that breaks new ground. Not so much the act itself, because we've already had Nixon trying to do that BS. Not necessarily within the Southern District of New York, but, congressional allies to quash a criminal investigation. Where have I heard that before? But it breaks new ground in terms of this investigation because things that we suspected have now been quantified. On the rest of the menu, a Catholic mom sues after a Trump-backed foster care agency calls her the wrong kind of Christian. Well, of course. Jeez, come on. Every KKK member knows the Catholics and the Jews are going to go first. We just can't decide which one is going to go first. It'll be the Jews. Clarence Thomas declares war on the very idea of a free press. The Sandman kid filing his $250 million lawsuit. And Clarence Thomas seems to think, man, if you don't put the word "it" in the right spot in the sentence, you're going down. And the horror is that Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, the horror, is just the kind of dapper Nazi that Trump likes. So, of course, they'll be meeting in the White House today. Yeah, today. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a top Nunes aide involved in the House intel investigation into Trump takes a job in the White House counsel office. Well, of course. They got to have a watchdog somewhere, don't they? And Haiti's Serious Crime Unit is investigating 5 Americans and a Serb national arrested with semi-automatic weapons. I smell Eric Prince, don't you? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice on the rightish of the page the chat room link with Kelly Lincoln monitoring that platform. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, your recurring contribution goes a long way to paying our bills and buying. We have to purchase some needed equipment here. And that's why I'm putting out the entreaties in even more of a desperate tone. Because, we've been using this equipment for many, many, many years. 24/7, 365, hardly ever been shut down. I mean, we reboot on occasion, did a little bit of traveling with some hours in between, but we've always tried to keep the station a-going. And that means machines hardly ever get turned off. It's amazing how we can eke out power from these things. But they do have some moving parts, and moving parts wear out, don't they? Well, thank you for your generosity in that. And also thank you to our recent Patreons on Patreon. Your recurring Patreon is going a long way, and thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do that by simply going to @NetrootsRadio. There it is. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. Wow, that's simple. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, so check that out. You can follow the show on Twitter @Cookbook West, and podcasts can be found by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. I know they're pretty much everywhere. So there, you can pick up the podcast there. All right, it's Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. And we are going to go to this first offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And when I say, will no one rid me of this priest, I don't mean it in a bad way. You know, I was baptized as a Catholic, and I did, for a very short time, study for the priesthood. Whew, boy. I don't know how I got out of I know how I got out of it. We were kind of kicked out of the church. Yeah. We were kicked out of the church when we moved from Oregon to California, and the diocese got a little bit of wind of some of our political inclinations and found out that my mother was a divorcee. Oh, my God. And our stepdad who adopted us wasn't even a Catholic. So that means that the guy who abused us and beat the crap out of my mom, put her in the hospital, beat us kids, all that kind of stuff. Well, he was a Catholic. Almost like a stereotype, huh? But regardless, that's how we got kicked out of the church. But I did briefly entertain the idea of being a priest. But when you're a kid, you do that, especially when you've been an altar boy. And then you find out the ways of the world, and I thought that I could do more in the world by not being a priest. And I may have been right. But discrimination in any form, I'm not for discriminating against evangelicals. If they want to get bit by snakes to prove their faith, I don't know. Maybe that could be considered a public health hazard. If they keep it within the confines of their little tent revival parking lot thing, maybe that's okay. I don't know. But regardless, if that's how they practice their faith, if they're not harming the greater community, I think that would be fine. Would they be allowed to adopt kids if they were trying to test the faith of the kids with rattlesnakes biting them? I don't know. Maybe an adoption agency might step in and say, I don't know, maybe that practice is a little odd. But to outright discriminate against a Catholic, because that's the wrong kind of Christianity, is taking the idea of religious freedom to the religious freedom to discriminate And that's exactly what the right wing has always wanted to do in terms of taking rights away from people. This is not conferring the right to discriminate. This is truly just taking rights away from people because discrimination is allowed. So we had reported last month about this waiver that the Trump administration had issued a South Carolina foster care agency, which coincidentally is also owned by Betsy DeVos. Okay. And it happens to be the largest foster care agency in South Carolina, but it only works with families that share its conservative evangelical Christian beliefs. Well, of course. So they decided that their idea of religious freedom is truly to discriminate against those that they don't believe are truly Christians. Catholics, they're not. They're not a Christian. I mean, they had like wars in France over this kind of stuff. They had King Henry VIII killing wives right and left to prove that he wasn't a Catholic. I mean, geez, this is serious stuff. And but of course, religious agencies operating with taxpayer funding, it is really never acceptable to use state or federal funds to discriminate based on religion. And this is what the lawsuit from this Catholic family is all about. Millhiser of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You know, Clarence Thomas has a vision of prosecutors targeting journalists for minor errors. Oh, my. I wonder if Ginny gave him this idea. Does he have an original idea? Because I think the intent's coming from, the better half, so to speak. Justice Clarence Thomas published an opinion on Tuesday, that was yesterday, announcing that he would completely rewrite the law of defamation, potentially to such a degree that journalists could be subject to criminal prosecutions for making truthful claims that embarrass the subjects of their reporting. Thomas's opinion, concurring in his court's decision not to hear McKee versus Crosby, is an attack on New York Times v. Sullivan, the seminal Supreme Court decision that prohibits a public official from recovering damages for a defamatory falsehood unless they can show that the statement was made with knowledge that it was false or with reckless disregard or whether it was false or not. No other member of the court joined Thomas's opinion. Now, the New York Times case involved an Alabama lawsuit that tried to impose crippling costs on the venerable newspaper after it published an advertisement seeking support for the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legal defense. The ad contained some factual errors, some of which were quite minor. It claimed, for example, that Southern officials arrested Dr. King 7 times when, in fact, he'd only been arrested 4. Shut down the Times. You said he was arrested 3 more times than he really was. Now, due to these errors, an Alabama police commissioner won a $500,000 jury verdict against the Times. The Supreme Court reversed the verdict, holding that the Times did not publish the ad with reckless disregard of whether it contained false statements. Now, the bulk of Thomas's McKee opinion recites harsh libel laws that existed under the old common law of libel. To prevail in a civil suit, Thomas writes, a defamed individual typically only needed to prove a false written publication that subjected him to hatred, contempt, or ridicule. The question of whether the person who published that statement did so recklessly was largely irrelevant. Now, in criminal cases, moreover, the standard was almost laughably draconian. Truth traditionally was not a defense to libel prosecutions, Thomas wrote. The crime was intended to punish provocations to a breach of the peace, not the falsity of the statement. Then Millhiser sums up, a journalist or anyone else with a platform for that matter could face criminal prosecutions even if their reporting is 100% accurate, because no kid who's wearing a racist MAGA hat wants to be called a racist, right? Thomas concludes his opinion by suggesting that federal courts should remove all limits on state libel laws. The states, according to Thomas, are perfectly capable of striking an acceptable balance between encouraging robust public discourse and providing a meaningful remedy for reputational harm. As a historical matter, Thomas is probably right that the framers and their contemporaries did not understand the First Amendment to require the rule announced in New York Times versus Sullivan. But the same could be said about virtually any Supreme Court decision interpreting that amendment. And no less an authority than Judge Robert Bork. You remember Bork, don't you? In fact, as an aside, will Barr become a Bork now? Inquisitive minds would like to know. Well, the failed Supreme Court nominee, Judge Robert Bork, the godfather of the conservative originalist movement, once wrote, "The framers seem to have no coherent theory of free speech and appear not to have been overly concerned with the subject." Nearly all modern First Amendment law is judicially constructed. Originalist sources are often useless when trying to determine how to read the amendment. Now, one area of First Amendment law that is judicially constructed is the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which permitted corporations to spend unlimited money to influence elections because corporations are people, my friend. Money doesn't talk, it swears. I swear to God. Well, Thomas is an enthusiastic supporter of Citizens United. Thomas wrote a separate opinion in Citizens United arguing that the court did not go far enough and that it should have also struck down laws requiring political donors to disclose those donations because the Russians need to hide even more of their ruble somehow. And, of course, Trump has, after all, pledged to open up all of our libel laws so that he can sue journalists who write articles he deems to be negative and horrible and false. Well, the New York Times case prevents politicians like Trump from doing so. If Thomas's view were to prevail, however, Trump would be able to seek out a state with laws favorable to his interests and sue journalistic outlets into oblivion. And I got to tell you, that's exactly what happened in Putin's Russia. Break period here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but that's okay. West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is a salon. We can do that. All right. Finishing up here then in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is another article out of Think Progress, this time by Luke Barnes. Sebastian Kurz, the whore. Well, he's been hailed as a conservative wunderkind but his governing coalition has plenty of far-right links. And when I first saw that, I thought it said far-right kinks, because I think that's really the better term. Well, today, the White House will host one of Europe's rising political stars, the 32-year-old chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz. And I got to tell you, he's a pretty good-looking dapper Nazi. Really is. Since becoming the head of state after a knife-edge election in 2017, I wonder what kind of Cyrillic help they got. The mind reels, considering what might have been instead. Well, Kurz has endeared himself to conservatives around the globe with his youthful charm and vehement opposition to European Union's immigration policies. Richard Grenell, Trump's ambassador to Germany, described Kurz as a rock star in a 2018 interview with the far-right publication Breitbart. Well, of course. I mean, Laura Logan says you got to read Breitbart to get the other side. Yeah, because we're not hearing enough evil satanic stuff already. For the second half of 2018, Austria, and thereby Kurz, assumed the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. Wow. Just like Vlad planned it. Beneath the charm and accolades, however, rests a far darker trait that makes Kurz an ideal European ally for Donald Trump, namely his rampant Islamophobia and a power-sharing agreement with the far-right Austrian Freedom Party, which has enabled the far-right to inject their ideas into the mainstream of Austrian politics. In order to establish a governing majority after the 2017 elections, Kurz's Conservative Party partnered with the Austrian Freedom Party, led by Heinz Christian Strache, a former neo-Nazi and now vice-chancellor, who reformed the Austrian Freedom Party to focus against immigration and Islam, and not just the Jews. Okay. In its online manifesto, for instance, the Freedom Party notes that Austria is not a country of immigration, and that the privilege of status as a public body shall be reserved for religious communities who acknowledge the separation of church and state. Oh, really? Have you been to America yet, Strache? In 2017, Strache called for an Austrian law to ban fascistic Islam, saying that otherwise we Austrians, we Europeans, will come to an abrupt end. Oh, we need to have more babies. Is that what you're saying? The anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies of Kurz's government will undoubtedly have fans within the Trump White House and their allies on Capitol Hill. For his part, white supremacist Steve King, Repug of Iowa, has made frequent trips to Austria and gave an extensive interview to the Austrian far-right TV channel in which he outlined his white nationalist beliefs. Coupled with the simmering far-right sympathies within Kurz's coalition, this week's trip is a clear indication that neither he nor his government are merely a fresh-faced vessel of conservatism. No, it's more than just being a dapper Nazi. All right, let's get to our break, and we will come back from that break and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
I think we all agree that there is a crisis even in our society about how we use science. We all know about climate change denial on one side, but there's also all the issues about opposing GMOs or anti-vaccination.
Lucy Jones. She's a seismologist and a policy advisor on earthquake risk. She spoke February 17th at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Washington, D.C.
And what we are seeing here is there is a significant part of society that doesn't understand how the scientific process works and looks at scientific information as something you get told to believe because the scientist said it's true. And then if you're going to believe that authority figure, there's several others that you could turn to as well.
So what to do? In 2016, she founded the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society, which tries to get the public and policymakers to use scientific information to improve the resiliency of their communities. And here's a brief portion of her talk proposing solutions to the problem of the gap between scientists and society.
We need to look at science education for the broader public, more focused on process rather than results. And this is another place where the internet has really changed things. You know, when I was in school, if you want to learn those facts, you sort of had to get it from the teachers or, you know, and learn enough to be able to go out and start doing research. Now, if you want a result, you can get it on your computer right away. What we need to do is not be teaching kids, for instance, that, you know, dinosaurs evolved into chickens, but rather how to recognize that the connection between dinosaurs and the avian species website is more reliable than one that tells us we descended from visitors from Mars. Both of them are out there on the internet.
You can listen to Lucy Jones's entire talk. Just look for the annual meeting live stream at meetings.aaas.org. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Donald Trump is claiming that voter fraud in the United States, quote, all over the country is rampant, end quote. Back with the facts in 7 seconds.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In 2012, Florida election officials claimed to have identified 186,000 non-citizens registered to vote. But then that claim was scrutinized, and the 186,000 number, that was reduced by 99% to 2,625 possible non-citizens on the rolls. But then that list was examined, and it turned out that that list, too, was riddled with errors and was wildly exaggerated, so that at the end of the investigation, only 85 people in Florida total were removed from the rolls out of a total of 12 million voters. Let's review. Out of 12 million voters in total, 85 persons were improperly registered to vote for one reason or another. The same basic story is now being repeated in Texas with apparently the same result. The bottom line, the claim of voter fraud is a fraud meant to justify voter suppression and foster racism and target immigrants and naturalized, eligible to vote, citizens.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The New York Times Tuesday night broke another big story, this time reporting that the president late last year asked then-acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker to put up a Trump ally in charge of the Michael Cohen investigation, which is led by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The Times said there's no evidence Whitaker acted on this alleged request, and Trump denied the report when asked about it by a reporter. NBC News has the story.
President Trump tonight is denying the explosive New York Times report that says late last year he tried to put his own appointee in charge of the investigation into those hush money payments during the 2016 campaign.
I don't know who gave you that. That's more fake news. There's a lot of fake news out there. No, I didn't.
The Times reports the president called Matthew Whitaker, then his hand-picked acting attorney general, to ask whether U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman could be put in charge of the widening investigation into his former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, according to several unnamed American officials. Berman had already been recused from the case. Just this month, Whitaker said this to Congress about presidential interference.
At no time has the White House asked for, nor have I provided any promises or commitments concerning the special counsel's investigation or any other investigation.
It follows new revelations from fired acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who now says he briefed lawmakers after the FBI opened an investigation into President Trump in 2017. McCabe telling Savannah Guthrie that no one pushed back.
Did you tell Congress?
General, and I told Congress what we had done.
Did anyone object?
That's the important part here, Savannah. No one objected, not on legal grounds, not on constitutional grounds, and not based on the facts.
That answer an apparent rebuttal to Republican criticism that top Justice Department and FBI officials were plotting an administrative coup.
Did you suspect the president might actually be working for Russia?
We thought that might be possible, yes.
The president overnight on Twitter accusing McCabe of treason.
I don't think really anybody takes those tweets by the president very seriously. I certainly don't at this point.
McCabe was fired from the FBI last year, accused of lying under oath about his interactions with the media.
McCabe seems to be everywhere these days as he's on a book tour. One of the other things he said that's getting a lot of attention is that he thinks it's possible that Donald Trump could be a Russian asset.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation, and I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
Senior White House officials pushed to share nuclear power technology with Saudi Arabia, despite the objections of ethics and national security officials, according to a new congressional report. Whistleblowers told investigators it could destabilize the Middle East with nuclear weapons proliferation. Elaine Chao is Donald Trump's Secretary of Transportation. She has met at least 10 times with Kentucky business leaders or politicians after email requests made by her husband, who just happens to be Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. A cache of more than 800 emails obtained under the Freedom of Information Act by the watchdog group American Oversight shows that some of those meetings led to McConnell's associates being granted their wishes by the powerful transportation secretary. From infrastructure grants to highway project funding. Both offices told Politico that it was normal for cabinet members and the Senate Majority Leader to work together. Austin Evers, the founder of American Oversight, said the emails show that, quote, Secretary Chao built a political operation in her office to favor Kentucky. In the first 24 hours of his campaign, over 223,000 of Bernie Sanders supporters contributed $5,925,771, with an average donation of, you guessed it, $27. Meanwhile, all that anti-Bernie vitriol you've been seeing on social media may be just what you're thinking they might be. Foreign state actors. Politico reporting that a wide-ranging disinformation campaign aimed at Democratic 2020 candidates is already underway on social media, with signs that, yes, foreign state actors are driving at least some of the activity. The main targets appear to be Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Elizabeth Warren, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, and Senator Bernie Sanders, four of the most prominent announced or prospective candidates for the presidency. Revenge much? The Department of Transportation said it intends to terminate an agreement that would have granted nearly $929 million in federal funds for California's controversial high-speed rail project, a day after the state joined others in a lawsuit challenging Trump's border wall emergency. Remember that high school kid from Covington, Kentucky that went on a school field trip to D.C. and instigated a confrontation with a Native American man at the Lincoln Memorial? Well, that kid has filed a lawsuit seeking $250 million from the Washington Post in damages, claiming the newspaper falsely accused him of racist acts and instigating the confrontation. In a statement, the boy's Atlanta-based lawyer said additional similar lawsuits would be filed in the weeks ahead. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Before you say music transcends all boundaries, take a look at a pair of concerts scheduled this week at the Colombia-Venezuela border, where pallets of American humanitarian aid sit in warehouses, blocked from entering Venezuela under order of President Nicolas Maduro. Depending on who you ask, that aid is either a cynical ploy to insinuate Maduro can't take care of his own people, or is much-needed relief for those suffering from a lack of food or medicine under his watch. Adherents of both interpretations are set for a musical standoff in the coming days. On the Colombian side of the border, British business tycoon Richard Branson is organizing a benefit concert on Friday titled Venezuela Aid Live.
Our goal is to raise $100 million in 60 days and reopen Venezuela's border so that humanitarian aid can finally reach those millions who need it the most.
Branson says his concert will draw inspiration from George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh and Bob Geldof's Live Aid Festival in 1985, but not everyone's buying it. Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters, who performed at the 2005 Live 8 Festival to address global poverty, released a video on Sunday accusing Branson of pushing for regime change in Venezuela, and he denied the existence of mayhem, suppression of the press, or apparent dictatorship under Maduro.
It has nothing to do with humanitarian aid at all. It has to do with Richard Branson, and I'm not surprised by this, having bought the US saying, we have decided to take over Venezuela.
Waters will be right at home at a concert organized by the Maduro government for Friday and Saturday on Venezuela's side of the border. The two-day event is titled Hands Off Venezuela. While lineups have yet to be released for either concert, it's safe to say anyone who dislikes a heavy dose of politics with their music should steer clear of both. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and it even feels like 34 according to the Weather Underground, and that's important. Our forecast is to be about nearly the same temp as yesterday, which we topped out at just under 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Overnight low of about 23. We are raining currently, and we're going to pick up with more rain. Winds are currently out of the west at a negligible 2 miles per hour. That's considered light and variable. But they are going to pick up in about an hour or so, continuing out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, where we are expected to get, well, just a tad under a third of an inch of rain. And then maybe tonight, in terms of just actual water coming from the sky, they're looking at a tad under a quarter inch. But mixed in with that will be some snow because of those overnight lows of, well, 22 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. My. We are in a winter storm warning, and they're looking at getting several inches, maybe 4 to 5 inches of snow above 2,000 feet, where the mothership here is at Rogue River. Our elevation is just a little under 1,300 feet, so you never know. It could come here too, but we're expecting at least something of a dusting tonight. And then tomorrow, being Thursday and Friday, we should be getting mostly sun, partly cloudy, a little bit of sun. I say mostly sun, I mean mostly cloudy, and the sun peeking through Thursday and Friday. And then we're looking for copious amounts of water mixed with snow over the weekend and through the beginning of next week. Okay, barometric pressure is falling at 29.71 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 54 and partly cloudy. Paris is 57 and partly cloudy. Rome is 58 degrees and sunny. Kiev, 42 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 22 degrees with snow. Hong Kong is 69 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 50 degrees with showers in the vicinity, and they are under a flood watch, so they have copious amounts of water falling from the sky. Sydney, Australia is 73 and partly cloudy. San Francisco is 48 and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and just immediately offshore. And New York is 29 degrees and cloudy with a weather advisory as well, if I can just make it come up, and it is cycling. And, a winter weather advisory as well. And so you're going to be cooler than yesterday. You're going to top out maybe at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So button those top buttons, hold on to your hats, and stay warm. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Brigham of Raw Story brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A top former staffer who worked for Devin Nunes is moving to a job in the White House. Until January, Nunes had chaired the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He lost his gavel and many staff positions when Democrats took over the House of Reps after winning the 2018 midterm elections. Scott Glabe, who was the deputy staff director, has moved to the White House counsel's office. Now, Glabe started working for Nunes on the House Intel Committee in January of 2016, according to the Congressional Staff Database Legistorm. He began as deputy general counsel, then became policy director, and then deputy staff director, according to the site. He worked there during a time of extraordinary tumult as Republicans and Democrats on the panel warred over how to investigate Russian efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. Now, as chair of the committee, Nunes was widely criticized for refusing to investigate allegations of misconduct by Trump's administration. For his efforts, Trump said he believes Nunes should receive the Medal of Honor. And Vlad would put it right on him. And he'll become a friend of Russia, too. Mother Russia. It's interesting that this fellow is in the White House counsel office because I believe it's William Barr's son-in-law who has also been put into the White House counsel's office. And I believe it's his daughter. Now, it could be the daughter-in-law or it could be the daughter, vice versa, son-in-law. But the daughter, or daughter-in-law, is now working for FinCEN. Oh, yeah, the part of the Justice Department that investigates financial crimes, especially financial crimes by hostile foreign actors, mobbed up nation states that have Cyrillic in their contracts. That department.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Ezekiel Abiu-Lopez of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I really do smell the smell of Eric Prince in this one. You tell me what you think. The Serious Crime Unit of Haiti's National Police is investigating several foreign nationals, including Americans, who were arrested in possession of semi-automatic weapons, Prime Minister Jean-Henri Cheant said. The group, which included 5 U.S. citizens, was arrested while driving in 2 vehicles on Sunday in the capital Port-au-Prince, adding to uncertainty in the impoverished Caribbean country after days of anti-government protests. Seant wrote on Twitter late on Monday that the investigation had been turned over to the Judicial Department, the detective service that works on serious organized and transnational crime in the poor Caribbean country. Seant also said that he had convened Haiti's Police Security Council, which includes the Interior and Justice Ministers and senior police officials, to discuss the case. He did not say when the meeting would be held. The U.S. State Department has said American citizens were part of the group, but has not revealed their identities. Wink, wink. Because they're private contractors. Mercenaries, Names given by Haitian media correspond to social media profiles of American citizens and a Serbian, oh, you mean white people, who claim military backgrounds and currently work for security contractors. National Police Chief Michel-Ange Gideon said the group faced charges of illegal possessions of weapons, and thousands of Haitians have been staging demonstrations since the 7th of February to demand the resignation of President Jovenel Moise amid allegations of corruption and also over high inflation, though the protests have receded in recent days. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period. Eric Prince, and there's some mercenaries there, and who leads the mercenary group for the United States right now? Eric Prince. All right. I don't know. Maybe Betsy DeVos wants to build some charter schools in Haiti too, and they just got to clear it out of bears. You need guns on schools because of bear attacks. Okay, could be. All right, let's get out of here. We are at the end of our broadcast period, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That's what we do on Thursdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Cohen. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.